Hi, I'm Sarah Sedwick. Welcome to my studio. This is my online mentorship group session for March 2019. And today we're going to be discussing painting black, painting the color black. And I have mixed up a palette from 2 tubes of paint, well, 3 tubes of paint, Burnt Umber, Ivory Black, and Titanium White. Here is a color chart that I made from this palette. And here is the, let me put my finger all in the paint. Here is the actual palette itself. So I've laid it out on the palette exactly the way that it is on the color chart, going from left to right, from color to no color. And so why did I pick these 2 colors? Well, I sort of want to illustrate the point that using black from the tube is acceptable, you know, but we can doctor it. You wouldn't want to come to a portrait and paint the shirt that I'm wearing with just straight black from the tube and then put a little bit of white in it in the places where there was light. It would end up looking flat, boring, and gray. We want to do with our blacks in our paintings what we do with our white in our paintings, which is let the ambient colors from the scene, from the room, from the light source influence that no color, in this case, black. So why did I pick Burnt Umber? It's warm. It's not super warm. It's not a brown that goes all the way to being reddish. It's kind of a restrained neutral brown, earth tone, but it's a lot warmer than Ivory Black, which the more titanium white you add to it, it actually starts to feel pretty blue, which is why I use it as my blue in the 3 primary palette, the Zorn palette, when I paint portraits. So we have a warm and a cool. And we have a still life that has warm light on it and cool shadows. So I've done a block in, just quickly, 10 minutes. And I did it using Burnt Umber and Gamsol only. I didn't go into any of my tints. I don't like having any white paint in my underpainting layer because it doesn't sink in and set up. So I did this about an hour ago, hour and a half ago. And I can rub it, and I can even take a paintbrush with Gamsol and swipe it, and it won't come up. But it's not completely settled. You know, it's not dry. It's just sunken into the canvas a bit. My point is, if you have no white in the paint and you thin it down with Gamsol, it will settle into the canvas and you can paint alla prima, wet on wet, right over it. And so I'm painting today on a canvas panel. This is a masterpiece canvas panel, masonite panel with canvas stretched on it. It's the same canvas and gesso as the normal stretched canvases that I usually use, but this one is just on a hard panel. Okay, so where should we start? Just the same way as if I was painting the white sphere on a white background. I'm gonna pick something that I understand, because the first decision I make is gonna set a parameter that I'm gonna have to follow along with throughout the rest of this painting. So what's kind of easy to diagnose? In a scene like this especially, my darkest dark is gonna be pretty easy to diagnose. So if I squint at the still life, there are a lot of darks, and there are a lot of darkest darks. So let's just pick one. And I have warm light from a halogen light bulb. So I'm going to say my shadows, my shadow family, probably my darkest darks, are going to be cooler darks. So I'll want to be choosing them from the cooler side of my palette. Let's talk about that for just a sec. So in this case, in this scenario, Burnt Umber, let's talk about value versus temperature. Burnt Umber is the warmest. It's also the lightest value square of the full strength squares. But 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's not a huge value difference there. They're 2, 3, and 4 are all about the same value. Ivory Black is maybe a little bit darker, and that doesn't even show up here on the video. I can see it with my naked eyes. But let's talk about temperature. Burnt Umber is the warm side, Ivory Black is the cool side. 3 is going to be, column 3 is going to be the most neutral. for me. And so I will be thinking about, if I'm painting in the light, I'm grabbing from this side of the chromatic scale. If I'm painting in the shadow family, I might want to think about going this side, but column 3 plays for both teams. That's my neutral. So for my darkest dark, and I probably, well, yeah, I do want to go all the way up to row A to start with, but I don't think I'm going to go all the way to Ivory Black. So I'm going to start with 4A, and I'm going to put in my darkest darks, which I see where there really is no light. The light source is coming from the left. So right away I can say the inside of this mug is going to be eclipsed. Whenever we have something like a mug or a bowl, the light hits the outside. So we have the lightest part on the inside opposite the light source, and then inside the rim on the side from which the light is coming, often dark, darkest. And then on the opposite side, on the outside, it'll again be darker. Painting from the general to the specific. Okay, so I'm going around and I'm putting in my darkest darks. It's interesting. Texture and the consistency of this paint. You can get a chromatic scale that's very similar to this by using burnt umber burnt sienna and ivory black, as some of us have experimented with on the Facebook page, posting those this month. Burnt sienna will take you much, much warmer on that side, but at about the halfway point, it looks a lot like burnt umber. So you could get a lot of these same effects just by mixing burnt sienna with ivory black. You would just have to stay much farther over to the right to get this same kind of palette. And you know, using straight black from the tube is great. I do it. You want to doctor it with colors from the surroundings. So, and I use ivory black. So now I'm painting some of my darkest darks, but the ones that feel warm. As this mug turns around toward the light source, it's still a black mug. Where it's not reflecting the ground, it's really dark. When I squint, all of this looks about equally dark, all of this passage that's not the reflection of the ground. There. Behind the stuff on the wall is black construction paper, which sometimes will have a brownish cast, you know, depending on your kind of black construction paper that you're working with. And on the ground is gray. It's a light gray, and to me, it feels like a cool light gray. I tried to set this up to have an absence of color in the negative space, so that's a good point, using black and gray. Yeah. Okay, so what was I saying? These darkest darks, as they move around toward the light, they start to feel warmer to me. Like this mug almost feels like a kind of a browny black, and I'm gonna try to ignore any local color issues that this cup might have. It's certainly not a perfect black. It feels browner than And so where else do I have darkest darks? Yes, possibly in the negative space. Let's put a little bit of that in too. And so the cast shadows, shouldn't the cast shadows be? Well, because the cast shadows are happening on a surface that is not as dark locally, value-wise. This is a light gray ground paper. It's not as dark as this by any means, and it's not as dark as most of the objects. The cast shadows aren't as dark as the darks on the form. And they're cooler. Cooler. Okay, so I'm pulling for my cast shadows from 3B, neutral, cooler than some things. And I'm going to block in some of my cast shadows. Let's see, the negative space. Go to 3. I feel a temperature shift. Not a huge value shift, but it's there. But certainly a temperature shift across the negative space from where the light's hitting more strongly on the left to where there's splattering, to where there's less influence from the light bulb on the right. So this is going to be a dark that's cooler. And I really was showing myself as I was blocking in, like, oh, you've got a lot of lost edges here. Where do I have lost edges? Between the sphere and the negative space right there. And that's a clue for me as far as what I can start painting the negative space with. But how am I going to see the difference between that sphere in the background? Well, if I bring you that far around the sphere, and I bring you this far around the sphere on this side, no, the light is warm. So let's back that up. One 1B. How about 1A? How about some straight burnt umber? Let's put that there. It's pretty easy to lighten things later. So just like I would if I was painting whites, and I want to keep my light whites darker so I can have more color and more saturation in them. Maybe I want to try to be as subtle about the value difference between my lights and my shadows in the black stuff as I can be. I'm getting a lot of glare from the window right now. Okay, this is 4A. And then that cast shadow really lightens up as it goes back. Let's go into 3C. And I feel like that is a sky hole. Let's go with 1B. Do not like thinking in terms of numbers when I'm painting. It's not my strong suit. So this is 1C. Where there's light, I'm going warm. All right, let's leave that. I was painting the negative space, wasn't I? But I have to pick up my palette knife for a second because I'm running out of this. Okay, back to the negative space. Really looking at that value difference between this and the mug. The mug at this point right here where it's totally turned away from the light source is about as dark a thing as I'm going to have in this whole painting. Here, I'm going to go into maybe let's start with 2A. Because this is still, I don't see any difference there. Okay, 2B. And as I'm working, I'm adding solvent-free gel. I've also got some of the solvent-free fluid. Maybe it's walnut oil. Can't tell. I think it's walnut oil. Never mind. In a cup that I'm adding to the paint as I'm going. And again, I feel like there's another lost edge here. Inside the mug where there's a lot of light and into the negative space here. But that tells me that maybe that light inside the mug is really not that light, because if it feels the same as the negative space, all right then. But what's the contrast that's showing me the form? Do I see anything going on that shows me this mug edge? Maybe there's a little touch of stuff here. And that's the darkest dark right there. And so I kind of am going back and forth, losing some detail, losing some correctness in the drawing, and then putting it back in as I work around the painting. So this is 2B. I'm painting the negative space around here. As it moves over to the light side of the mug, I think it gets even warmer. So let's go over to, maybe I'm going to split the difference between straight burnt umber and row B. Cheating. It's not cheating. I invented this game. I can do that whatever I want. The more times you touch the canvas in between trips back to the palette, you're going to mix. You're going to mix in what's already there. And I want that to happen, because that means that you're painting up to what you've already painted and into it. I want you really trying to massage the paint into the areas that already have paint on them. Don't paint up to an area and stop, and then paint up to an area and stop. That means that we leave what? A halo around the line from our underpainting. Okay, now I'm in legitimate 1B. Good. So now that I kind of have some of that information down, I can move back into my objects. This is 2A. Could come back in to, this is 2B, and redraw this thing that I sort of messed up by massaging the background into it. 3A. Okay, so far I've pretty much been staying, I haven't been staying in the shadow family, but I've been staying in my darkest darks. So some of my darkest darks happen in the light, like here, but they got warmer. I've got cooler darks in this big dark shape that happens on the mug. When I squint, that all kind of becomes one big dark shape, but as it moves away from the light source, I am making it cooler. And hopefully that's going to work. but I've been staying in the darkest darks. Well, let's move up into some midtones. This is glass. It's black glass, but it's translucent, transparent glass. We're seeing this black negative space through the glass. What am I going to find? It's going to be different. It's going to be lighter in this case, the stuff that's seen through glass. Often if you have a light background, certainly through a black glass, what you would see through the glass would be darker. In this case, it's looking lighter, partly because this is the closest to the light source of all three of my things, and there's a lot of light happening here. So what I painted this with, right, was 1B. So let's go to something darker and duller. Let's go to 2B and see how that works. No, I said I was going lighter, didn't I? Let's try it anyway. It's cooler, it'll feel lighter. There is a darker part right here and here. Up in this base where it's black, it's even cooler. So let's go 2 over. Let's go to 4B for that. Lovely. And God, this is so confusing. I can do it, you know, I can do it in my mind, but having to talk about it while I'm doing it with this chart with the numbers, that is a workout. Keep me young. So this shape was 2B. The lighter one, I'm going to go to 2C. But I want something warmer, so I'm going to go back to 1B. Now that's the same as the negative space here, and it's lighter. It's lighter than the negative space, so let's go to 1C here. Great. Pretty good. Push it a bit more. This is 1D. And I see and feel a lost edge here between this light, which is 1D, just burnt umber and white, and the ground. Just at that spot. Okay, so it gets a little darker. Inside here. It's in light though. It's in light, so I want it to be a little warmer. Maybe this part can be cooler. This is row 3. So let's move over to the warmer stuff for this side. Great. It's clean that up a little bit. It's like I get my values right and then I can come back in and clean up the drawing. Ideally, it all comes together. It all happens at the same time. But maybe it doesn't. Yes, and row E is you're right, is not going to be anything except the highlights. I just don't have anything that's that light of a local value. The lightest thing that isn't a highlight in this still life is right here, the ground in the light. And so this is what? This ground in the light here is 1D. So I've done a fairly decent job of conserving 1E, the lightest thing that I mixed up, for maybe, it's the lightest, warmest, okay, 1E, maybe here. Then what do I do about my highlights? If my highlight is lighter than the ground here and I want to make it feel lighter, then maybe I go to something cooler, or maybe I make a kind of a mid step between these two and put that here. But I think by taking my highlights a little cooler, they'll pop even more because cool colors feel lighter to our eye. Now let's go back into the midtones. I've established my lightest light now and I've got my darkest dark, so I'm in good shape. But the midtones are where arguably the confusion may happen. Certainly it's where a lot of action and subtlety occurs. Harder to diagnose those midtones. Easy to see where your darkest darks are, your lightest lights. Because full strength burnt umber is so much, well, is lighter anyway than anything that happens once you start mixing ivory black into it, full strength burnt umber can kind of function as a dark midtone here for me. And that's what I'm painting with right now. Maybe it has a little white in it. Cooler as we move away from the light source. Let's go into, no, even cooler. Let's go into 3B. See, B feels like too much of a jump. I kind of want like a 1.5. I keep wanting that. So, you know, a lot of the time my goal is to keep my value shifts as subtle as possible. When I squint, there isn't very much contrast here. It does get lighter as it moves around in this light shape toward the light. So I went from this to this to this as I move across that light shape. Do you see that? Carve out the handle with a piece of light that's here. Sometimes when you've got something like this kind of stripy shadow of the handle on the cup, I see people trying to do that with, you know, by painting that stripy shadow. You could just as easily, if not more easily, do it by painting the light that's around it. Put the dark in first. Because lighter paint with white in it is so opaque, it covers so well. Sometimes it can be easier to paint the light over the dark. That's the way I like to handle cast shadows on the ground. I really like to put my cast shadows in first and then put the light over and around them to modify their edges, soften their edges where I want it softer. Now, some of you have heard me say, I will talk to myself and say, move on. Stop working on that. Leave it alone for a little while and what? Give it a chance to be done. if I kind of get the foundations of the form looking all right on this cup, when I come in with the highlights, it'll really just bring it all the rest of the way to completion. Highlights and dark accents. I'm not quite ready for that yet. And the handle still looks kind of fat, doesn't it? All right, back to the sphere in the midtones. The sphere looks pretty good, but it needs some warms added to it, I think. I've got the core shadow. It's all kind of fading into the darkness, isn't it? I've got the core shadow and the reflected light, but I want to hit that light side some more. So this is 1B. So far, I have not really gone into 4 and 5 at all, have I? I have gone into 4A, but I have a little bit into 4B, but not any of this. But I think when I come in to do my highlights and dark accents, I will go there because my darkest darks are going to be my coolest things. But yeah, so I'm in row 1, burnt umber, and maybe I'll just take my straight burnt umber with a little bit of white in it. I see very little contrast here, where the negative space is like 2B. Maybe I have a lost edge in the midtone here too. That's cool. To A. The glare is making my life difficult. 3. Let's hit that dark, dark again. This is the shadow of the mug happening on this side of the sphere. Awesome. Feels very sculptural. I want to hit the reflected light again. The reflected light feels really warm coming from the ground. If I go to straight burnt umber, put that in again. I don't really want to go to 2 to 1B, but maybe just a little right there. And then the highlight, let's go to 1C. It's a really diffuse highlight on this styrofoam ball. The more times I touch this, though, what will happen? Blend away my beautiful brushwork. Yeah. All right. About ready to leave that. Just want to soften that edge between the shadow and the light just a bit. Great. Let's go to the There's something going on inside the cup that I'm not, the glass that I'm not really happy with. You can kind of see its own cast shadow through the glass. This is 3B. Two, 2B. Okay, back to the ground. 2C. One D, 1D. How does it? No, it's too light. Back to 2C. I'm gonna darken it. How about 2B? No, it's too warm. So 3C. And if that gets darker, then the cast shadow's got to get darker too. So 3B. And then 3D. There we go. That worked. It's that light that's inside there, but it is light that kind of seen through glass and it's reflected on the ground. I don't know. I just don't want to paint the ground. Sorry. Okay, 4B, cast shadows. No, let's see. There's a little piece of cast shadow right here. And maybe I'll hit this again. Yeah, I would like that better if it's cooler. 3C. And if I messed up my back edge here, I can come back and fix the sphere. Ground. Well, this cast shadow also kind of comes up onto the cup. Where it's on the cup, it feels warmer to me. Where it's on the ground, it feels cooler. So we'll put that there. And now, as I was painting the ground, I was using 1D and 1E. I think I want to get some 1C involved. Because I think I went too light too fast. I really do want this all to feel like black. Too much paint, take some off. Because I'm taking all of that light down a notch. I'm going to take it down to 1C instead of 1D where I started. Not as worried about messing up that cup ellipse as I am about getting a rich edge there. So paint it right up to it, into it. Hmm. The technical term for what I'm doing now is noodling, I think. One way to stop yourself from noodling is to pick up a bigger brush. Makes it really hard to be in your detail areas that you so desperately want to be playing with. If you just force yourself to get a bigger brush. I'm painting with a number 4 flat right now, and this is a 9x12 canvas. That's a pretty small brush for this. Ah, that's nice. That makes it feel nice and blue. So this is 1D. only reason that I'm willing to do all this weird counting while painting or even try it, because I love you guys so much.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah. So this is this 1C. Yeah, the darker you keep your darks, and this is not supposed to be a white ground. It is supposed to be gray, light gray. It's pretty light. You can see in the picture. There. Okay, so the lightest part of the ground is right here. I'm not planning on getting any lighter than this. I just want to get my brushwork feeling good and use this to carve out this here, this stuff that's happening here. And once I like my brushwork, then I'm going to just leave it. That's all that I'm doing right now is adjusting the brushwork. No, don't screw it up now. So once I get kind of past this super light spot, I'm going to go back to a darker value, but I may not go back to this that I was painting here because it's warm, and this is the warm side. This is the light side, and the light side is warm. So I may go now to something that's the same value but cooler. So let's stay here, but go one over, and maybe I'll have to go like into the mid between those two because, yeah. Good. So I mix these two. And it's okay. Like if you understand what you're doing, I'm okay with you mixing in between your piles. One of the main reasons that I suggest when you're doing value studies and color studies, not mixing in between piles is so that you can clearly kind of know what is going on with you, what you have on your brush, what you're working with. And let's darken again as we are moving over. It feels pretty light over here, but I think that's just because, you know, it's against this dark shadow. I gotta keep moving my eye around and saying, okay, well, compare, if I'm just comparing this to the dark shadow, it feels pretty light and it feels lighter than back here. I gotta keep comparing it to this, the lightest thing on the ground. And I want to create a sense of light and shadow. So I might just push it. So I'm gonna move over to, what was that? 3D, I'm gonna move over there. So I'm gonna go from here to here. Cooler colors feel lighter to the eye. That is the exact same value. I don't know. Let's make another mid mixture. That. As I come to my cast shadow, I've got a chance to play with that edge. Gorgeous. Now I want to soften that edge again. I need another rag. This is ridiculous. Got a chance to play with that edge again. What is this? It's, I don't know, what is it? 4B? Is that what that is? Maybe. Yes. 4B and then 4A in the darkest part. Lovely, lovely. If I need to come at it from the other end again, this is called working your edges. but not being perfectionistic. It's a balance. Get rid of that dirty mark there. All right. What next? Now I'm just sort of cleaning it up. If you don't clean your brush appropriately, you're gonna end up with some streaks. And then you will have to go back and fix them. And it's managing these transitions from light to shadow. That's what painting is, managing the transitions from light to shadow. But I do spend a fair amount of time kind of tweaking it a lot, no matter what I'm painting. Tweaking those kinds of things. You get the general form established, solid, and then you can go in and start playing with the details. And I'm about ready for some highlights. Anybody see anything that's just jumping out, driving you crazy? I want that to be warm in there. I feel some warmth. I can feel some light. I can feel a little sky hole here. But that's really going to be just about between 1A and 1B. That's pretty much dirty brush with some straight burnt sienna and white, burnt umber, white. The highlight right here could happen to be one. This kiss, not a bad option. The kiss is a small detail. It's not a strong value contrast, but it is an interesting small detail. And so you have that. But yeah, it's probably going to be an effective contrast. So it'll be, my guess is the mug handle. But you got me. Like, I did not come into this being overly stressed about a focal point. Let's get some temperature difference to show what's glass and what's mug here. So glass in the shadow. I'm in 4, 4A, 4B. Right, 4, yeah. Because I feel it's dark, it's away from the light source, it's cool, and then the mug is there, and the mug is warm. So this is 2. You know, my favorite recipe for dark darks is the glib answer is probably purple. I will add purple or purpley brown to things a lot to darken them. But if I'm gonna paint something that's black, oftentimes I'm just using black, but I'm adding the colors to it of whatever's around. It's kind of like when I paint whites, I make a peachy flesh tone, which is white with orange and blue in it, pretty much. It's a warm gray, white is a main component of that. And so just like I have to use a lot of titanium white to paint a large white passage in a painting, I would use black from the tube to create blacks in a painting, but I would doctor it with the colors that were around. I wouldn't use a whole lot of straight ivory black from the tube, except maybe for accents, like the way that I might go into a white dish and pop some titanium white on the highlight. Black is the same deal. So let's put some dark accents on here. You know, I mentioned the detail and how I'm going to handle that and which details I'm going to play up and which ones I might leave out. And so the rim of the glass is one of those. I want to make sure it's right enough It's a little weird here at the edge. Just 3C. I want it to be right enough, no, 3B. Right enough that it's not distracting, but I don't want to beat you over the head with it. And I don't want to have to cause myself to repaint all of that stuff. How much is enough? I think that might be it. Sure, I see the line here. I see more line here, but do I really want to put it there? I don't. I don't think I need it. But I think I want a softer edge right here. So I'll blur that with one brush stroke. And maybe I'll make a lost edge here. Soften it. Supporting character status. Right enough to not be grabbing attention, but not a hard edge that's going to ask us for anything. Okay, highlights. Great. This edge now is harder than I want it. I'm using the corner of this flat brush now as kind of a round. It's one reason I love flat brushes. They're so versatile. You can make such a variety of marks with them. All right, stop. So we talked about making the highlights a little cooler, particularly on the glass. I see them very cool. And I have some reflections. I have some subtle, like window-ish reflections. So let's go into 5 black tints. 5B. 5B. Ivory black plus a little bit of white. I don't have a ton of paint on the brush. And I'm just gonna like selectively put some of these reflections in the darks here. I kind of did it already in the glass right there. I want to put one in the cup too. Great. And the highlights in the cup, in the mug, I feel are warmer. So maybe I'll go into 2E for those. Get a little solvent-free gel in there just to help it stick, I think. 2E. 1. It's very light. All right, let's try 2D for these secondary highlights. Yeah, softer one. And now those are making this stuff feel not light enough. So I'm going to go into 1C and I'm going to just touch this again. Yeah. One A. The more times you touch it, the more you're going to blend away everything you did. So be careful. Okay. Where else? The glass, cooler ones. So let's go to 3D, maybe the halfway point between 3D and 3E. And see how that works. Uh-huh. And on the main body of the thing, oh, let's go all the way to 3E. Not feeling light enough? Let's try 5E. Yeah, that's probably hard for you guys to see, but that does feel a little lighter, cooler, lighter. Click and drag it a little bit. There are some minor highlights. Let's go 4, C, D. There, the blue one. And then on the rim, there's just one little one. Let's try 2D. Great. All right, I think that might be it. There, you can see it. That's better. So my transition between light and shadow that starts here and kind of goes diagonally down to the sphere is a little wonky, a little hard. And everything looks kind of brown, but you know, this is black that's been influenced by brown. Ivory black is the cool dark here. And the midtones and the warms are created with a brown that we typically don't think of as a warm brown. Certainly there are warmer options out there. And you could get this with burnt sienna. If you mix the burnt sienna and black together to start with, and then that became your warm pile. But if you go all the way to burnt sienna with ivory black, then you really get some very orangey stuff. For example, you can see how much more orange burnt sienna feels than burnt umber. But once you get past the midpoint, this feels just like the burnt umber color chart. Once we get burnt sienna knocked down enough, cooled off enough, this side of the color chart is really the same as that. All right, well, this was a lot of fun, guys. If there's nothing else, I will say sayonara and see you on Facebook.